Okay, we're live. Excellent. I just wanted to get this going, and I'll pause it. Um, just so you're aware, I made a couple of adjustments to our schedule, and it benefits you. I'm giving you extra time. Hi, come on in. I'm giving you extra time on the assignment. So normally what I was doing is we meet every Friday, and what I was doing was asking you to turn in your assignments the Thursday by midnight before, but I'm changing it so that you have through class on Friday, and I don't want to ruin your weekend. So you have until Monday at midnight to do it. And part of the reason I was talking to some other instructors about it too, and part of the thought process behind that, just so you're aware, is lots of times if you have a question or an issue or something like that that you just can't quite get resolved, or it's hard to do over email, or that kind of thing, sometimes you just come into class and say, I've got this, but I'm stuck on one little piece in a quick conversation or whatever exchange, and then it solves your problem. That way you can still go back and fix it or adjust it, and then you still turn it in on the following Monday. Hopefully that will help you. So the first couple of assignments, anybody who still hadn't completed them, I'm not marking them late. I just wanted to get on this. I'm going to start doing this. I believe I updated all the dates and times appropriately. I have to double check. I also removed an assignment. I have to take it out of Blackboard, but in the schedule I moved it. Unit 6, you're still responsible for it, and we're going to go over it, but I'm not going to ask you to do an assignment. Sometimes I'll have maybe do a quiz, and I have to double check that, but I'm not going to make you actually do a coding assignment for that one. I'm trying to give you a little bit of a break before the midterm comes up. But I know you probably have other classes too you have to worry about, and that's just one less thing to deal with. So just kind of thinking that mindset now. Whatever we get this week, whatever we do this week, then you've got until the following Monday of the next week. So you have a little extra time, a couple extra days, in this case, the weekend. And it doesn't ruin your weekend because then you still have Monday. So I didn't want to ruin your weekend. So hopefully that helps. Hopefully that helps. So this is, let's see, learning units. And I have to go through and finish updating all the dates for these. But if you even look at 2, which I know most of you have submitted unit 2, if you look at and you click on the date, technically this was supposed to be due yesterday, and I've already updated, so it's really, it doesn't due until Monday, so you still have time. So even if you didn't finish it, you still have time. I'd rather have the work and have you understand it and it's correct than rush through it just to meet a deadline. I hate that. I don't know if I mentioned, but I'm taking class myself, and I'm very stressed as well, so I get it. And so my instructor staggers stuff, which is a little nice, but it's also a little frustrating because I have dates all over the place. But you know what? That's part of it. But she's trying to balance it out so everything's not due at the same time, which I appreciate. I do appreciate. Um, any questions on any of that? This again. We didn't finish quite the last one, and then the exercise, and I put that with more details in there. Any issues with that? And some of them I know it comes down to more of a math issue. So what I always do as a programmer is whatever it says, like in this case with the quarts to gallons, just okay, how many quarts are in a gallon? I mean, all that kind of stuff, and break it up. So if someone in this case to do 18, it tells you the different scenarios. But do the math. Just write it down on a piece of paper, use a calculator if you have to, whatever the case may be, so that when you write the code, you know what result you should get. It's kind of the old joke. I used to say this all the time about lawyers. Lawyers already know the answer to a question that they're asking. They don't ask a question that they don't know the answer to. At least the good ones, supposedly the good ones, or the ones who are prepared are. I don't know how true that is. I've heard that. I do know some attorneys that practice litigate or anything like that. But so again, interest defeat, the same thing. If you're going to enter something, know yourself the math problem behind it. That's it. You have to understand that. I'm doing a lot of that now with one of my other classes with programming, and it's just a lot of our instructors harps on it. Just make sure you know the math, do the formula, and then do the code, right? Kind of like we talked at the beginning about pseudocode and going through the steps of doing it, like adding 2 numbers. Okay, 2 plus 3 is what? It's 5, right? So when we write our program, we should know if I get these two numbers, that's what it should be like, right? Let's do this. I'll tell you what, and I'm going to just keep recording this. I'm going to do a Kahoot just to kind of help review and kind of get you guys. I know it's exciting. It's a Friday. I'm going to tell you this. I realize that Fridays afternoons are going to be tough. So I'm going to do my best. I love to code, but we'll see. So let's do a Kahoot. I'm going to pause this. All right. Oh, this unit, in case you didn't notice, this is unit 3 we're going to start, and it's for the next 2 weeks. Just because it's a lot of stuff. It's a kind of new concept. I've never done some of this stuff before, so I like to spread it out over a couple weeks. That, and I also, after our midterm, I do a raise for 2 weeks, because that seems to be a topic that trips up students. We make it through it fast. You guys are a small class. It might be easy. I don't know. And if you do, that's great. Then we've got more time for other stuff. And we'll talk about maybe the project, about how we want to do that. So we can figure this out as we go along. It's not a problem. Are we good? So this week, like I said, is Unit 3, Methods, Classes, and Objects. And there's the PowerPoint we're going to talk about. And this is kind of the crux of object-oriented programming, not just Java, but any object-oriented language that uses classes. This is how it's structured, how you structure everything, how it's created, how you use them, creating an instance of a class. And there's some other information, there's some other resources here about some other. So I highly recommend, I always do this to any class I do, don't just take what I say as gospel. I mean, go to outside resources. You've got access as a Gateway student to LinkedIn. It's free, and you can get access to other videos and other stuff. I go to other sites too. I use a site called Udemy, and they've got good stuff. Some of it's free, some of it you have to pay. I paid $5, $10 for different classes, but you learn different ideas and different ways of teaching, which is the other reason why a lot of times with the videos from other instructors, I will leave them on here. Oh, they're here? Yeah, so here's some archive. Did I leave those? But I did. Oh, I will make these all available. I don't want them to confuse you, but I figure if there's other videos out here, they might be helpful to you. You know, well, this is what Chris said, this is how he said it. Well, let's look at this instructor, how he said it. Maybe there's another angle or another take on it, right? We've all had different teachers, and you learn differently from different teachers. So I will make these available to you. I thought I had them available. So this week's next couple weeks, so we don't have to do this out. We're going to do a lot of these today. Some of these today is we're going to create some classes. This Paradise info, you'll be tired of hearing about it by the end here. Pops up. We're going to go through all these UDoITs. Again, gives you the idea step by step of how to do stuff. There is a 5-question quiz, again, main geared towards class participation, and you have plenty of time to take it. And you can take it multiple times. Again, similar to like the Kahoot style with the multiple choice. And then a couple exercises, 3 of them. Writing code based on what we did. You don't have this one. This one you can't see. That's hidden there. So, okay. So let's just talk about some of the stuff and then we'll write some code. Yay. And like I said, I won't bore you with PowerPoints, I promise. Okay. But we got to talk about some of the basics here. Talking about method, calls, placement, parts. You can read that as well as I can. You've got the PowerPoints, but basically creating classes, our own classes, and using methods, or even creating methods inside our main class, as we've been doing. And all a method is just another like a piece of code, and they call it a program module. It has a bunch of statements. A lot of times, what you do as a developer, you decide to create a method when you want to do something specific, maybe a calculation. I want to calculate interest on a loan. Instead of having extra code in your main code, you might create a method that just says and you would call it, and it would then give you that information. And we will do all that stuff. But the idea, a lot of instructors that I've learned from over the years, and to tell you that what you should do is you should really try to break it down into small methods. Small methods allow because then it's more modular and it's easier to use. So like I said, it's just code. It has a series of statements and it does something. You know, it's got to do something. Maybe it even displays something. It prints something on the screen. We've created one of the methods we create, I think, is display info or something like that, where it displays information. And what you do is you create this method and then you call it or invoke it is what. So you're going to learn some more terminology. So much terminology coming out of your ears. So you're going to invoke. If someone says, "Did you invoke that method?" Oh, they're saying, "Did you call it? Did you create this method's out there? Did you call it?" So we're going to do all this stuff. So here's an example. We'll stick with these for a little bit just to get you going, get your feet wet, and then we're going to write the code. So I have a class here called public first. Okay, public class. Now, public, again, public means it's accessible. Anybody else can use this. If they see it, it's available to the public. There's ways if you want to create methods that you don't want anybody to see or classes that you can make them private or what's called protected, and they can't see it. So in this case, we have public class first. Remember, first is arbitrary. It can be called anything. In this case, we're calling it first. Guess what? There's our main method right there. Public static void main. Okay? All that's pretty much boilerplate. That doesn't change. And then inside of it, they're actually calling a method called display address. It's not created yet. I don't see the code for it. Where's the code? It's not there, but they're going to call it. And then they're doing a print line saying, this is my first Java application. Very exciting. Okay. And it's kind of following on the book is showing that there too. What I like to do too, I wonder if the one, let me pause this for 2 seconds. Let's do this. Let's go into JGrasp. I'm gonna make it big, and we're gonna create new Java. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna do yeah, we can do that. And I'm gonna talk about the 118, but I'll just start coding. You don't have to follow the book if you want. So I could have you do an example, but I want it for sake of just time and getting through some of this stuff. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna create this class, and it's gonna be called Paradise Info. So we're gonna say public class, and then Paradise Info. Okay, and then open curly and close curly, like so. Okay, so simple class, and then we're gonna do our typical class inside because we're gonna display information. We're gonna run this class, just this one class. So we want to do public. Again, everything is public, so we can call anybody can use this public static void, not some super secret class. String and then args. Yeah. Okay. And again, what I usually like to do is as soon as I get this framework set up, and I usually like to save it right away. So I do a Control S to save it. And again, save it wherever you want to. So if you've got a thumb drive or you want to put in your Google, or if you're just saving it locally on one of these and then you're going to copy it, but I see some of you are using laptops, whatever you want to do, just don't forget where you saved it to, because I hate you to lose all that time. So they want us to save us as, all right, it should be, where does it say that? Paradise Info. So, and again, in Java, I'm going to overwrite mine, so you won't get that message. Again, in Java, whatever you name the class is typically the name of the file. Not typically it is, because you'll get an error message, and I think I showed you some of that. I'll show you again. Okay, so in the main method, again, notice I'm tabbing over, doing spacing. We're going to call a method called display info. And just to let you know, this is called camel case, lowercase on this first word, and then up capital letters, and they call that camel case. That's very common in languages. Some people, it drives them nuts. Some people only do lowercase. Some people will do it and don't follow what I'm typing. They'll do something like this. They'll do all kinds of weird stuff. I'm kind of following the book just to keep it consistent, but that is, there's best practice about how you should type things, how you should do it. So you kind of stay consistent. So display info. All right. Okay. So we're gonna call this method called display info. All right. Now here's the thing. I get nervous about calling a method that doesn't exist. So I can save this and let's do this. I'm going to run it. I'm gonna compile it, hit my little plus key, and it's gonna compile. But I'm gonna get an error. And the error is gonna come up and it's just gonna go boom right to this one. Hey dude, you're calling a method that doesn't exist. Right? Can't find symbol. Doesn't exist. Well, yeah, I'm creating this out of thin air. It doesn't exist yet. So what I like to do sometimes, this is just me, because here I'm gonna tell you. My thing is, and I'm gonna do a slash slash, I'm gonna comment it out. My thing is that if you might start typing something and then you're going to do this, and that's fine. We all get distracted. A phone call comes up, someone comes over to your desk, you get an email, whatever the case may be, and then you just keep coding. And then all of a sudden you get an error, and you don't know why you have the error. We don't have an error. You have an error, and then I've seen people spend hours trying to figure something out when it was as simple as this. They were calling some method that didn't exist. Just silly stuff. So there's nothing wrong with doing this. It's a placeholder now. So I just do that. So now if I want to, I can compile this again and it should compile fine. And I can even run this. It doesn't do anything. Does nothing, right? Because technically there's nothing in there. It's just because that slash slash is a comment. So then what we're going to do is we're going to actually create the method. So we're going to type public static void display info. So it's going to be the exact same name of what you typed up there. Same capitalization, same syntax. Something else I will do sometimes is I will literally just copy and paste that line. I can't tell you how often, especially new developers, will mistype it. They'll do lowercase here, or they'll accidentally do a space there, or something like that. So to me, copying and pasting is probably the easiest, but it's a short method, so it's easy. And then inside this method, all we want to do is print out two lines. So system.out.println, and we're going to say paradise day spa wants to pamper you. Don't forget, so you're sending this string out and you put everything in quotes. You know, let's change to green and then you close the semi. And don't forget to put a semicolon at the end of it. I'll make it a little bit smaller so you can see it better. Helps having the TVs. A lot of times you teach this class and you just have one screen at the front and people are way in back and it's really hard for them to see. And then one more line, system.out.println, we will, oh, jeez. We will make you look fantastic. You look marvelous. There was a sketch, I love sitcoms on it, and Saturday Night Live did it years ago with Billy Crystal, and he goes, "You look marvelous." You ever hear that? I don't know if you spell it right. Marvelous, something like that. It doesn't matter. Anyway. Hey, if you want to be creative and do stuff like that, I don't have any problem with that. As long as the code works and it does generally what it's supposed to do, if you want to add funny stuff or what, as long as it's family friendly, I have no problem with that. Okay, so now I've got the main method and I've got the display info method. I'm going to try to compile this again, hit the plus key and compile, and it compiled. Everything is great. Okay, beautiful. Let's run it. I'm going to click the run guy. It's going to run it, and it ran, but nothing really happened, right? Well, why didn't anything happen? Because I have the method display info, but it's commented out, right? I'm not calling it. It's still commented out, which is fine. So this is something also you should know. You may have a lot of methods in a program or methods that don't work or methods of this or that. And so a lot of times it's beneficial that instead of just starting to delete all code like that, I'm a big advocate of just comment stuff out first, because I'm telling you, a week, 3 weeks, a month, 6 months down the road, you're going to uncomment it out for some reason. Someone changes their mind or whatever, or you just need to reference it. Why did I do that? So a lot of times people will do that and they'll put their initials. In this case, we do want it, so I'm going to uncomment it, save it. I'm going to recompile it because I changed code. Every time you change code, you've got to rebuild it, and then I'm going to run it. And now you can see what it shows you. It spits out the line. Paradise Day Spa wants to pamper you. We will make you marvelous. We'll make you, I'm supposed to look marvelous. That's all right. So what happens is we come in here and we're going to do stuff later on where you debug and you trace and you figure all this stuff out, why stuff is happening and what order it's happening in. I thought it was doing this, but it's doing that. How did that happen? I don't know. You come in here, public static void main. It comes in here. It hits this one, right? Display info. As soon as it hits this line, then boom, it pops down to here. And the first line of code it hits is this. It's that line of code. Then it hits the second line of code. And then it pops out. And then it's done. And if you're not sure, what you can always do, you can do stuff like this. And this is huge. You're going to probably do this a lot when you program. And this adds a lot more to it, but that's okay. So we're just going to do this. So system.out.println is, I'll do something like this. I'll say before display. Because maybe there's a problem, you don't know what's going on. Display info. Oh, this is some text string. And guess what? I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to put the similar line after it. But I'm going to change my indents, make it look pretty, and I'll do after. So all I'm doing is just putting some extra text in there, just so I know what is potentially going on and when it's happening. And that way I can trace it better. So I just added the print line, so now I'm going to compile it again. And you will use these techniques, all this stuff, all the time. I mean, I still do stuff like this constantly. There's some things you get quicker at as you get better. And then we run it. All right, so now we ran it. Let's see what happened. So it comes into main, and then the first thing it hits is the system out display info, and there it is, before display info. Then it goes into display info, and then in display info, it prints out those next two, this Paradise Spot, and then there those two are. They're sandwiched in there. And then finally, we pop out display info. What's after display info? One more line is it says after display info, and that prints that out. So the method is sandwiched between those two statements. So you just have to watch your sequence of when you're doing stuff, how you're doing it. But that is the basics of creating a class using different methods. Now the main method is the built-in method, but we just created this one from scratch. This is just our own. We created it. We could have called it anything. We could have called it George. Okay, it didn't matter. As long as you call it George here, you got to call it George when you call it, right? When you invoke it, however you want to say it. All right. So one more piece to this puzzle of what they want you to do in this exercise is they want you to call this from another class. Okay. So I've got this method in here called display info, and it's a public class like I show you there. So what you're going to do is we're going to create a new class, and then it's called test info. So we're going to do file new Java, and again you can call it anything you want. We're going to stick with the book. So public class, and this time it's test info. And I'll do this a lot of times too. You just want to test to see if the class is working. You're calling it and you want to see, hey, is it doing what I thought it was supposed to do? Okay. So now we're going to do public static void main string args. Okay, open curly, close curly, like so. Now, I get my test info up there because I did Control S to save it, and I will just save it, and it's going to overwrite, and that's fine. We'll do that. And now becomes the fun part. Just 2 lines of code, nothing really big, but you'll see it's kind of powerful. And this is kind of, again, the idea behind doing a lot of this stuff. So I'm just going to type system.out.println so I know what's going on. And it says calling method from another class, like so. Okay, so now the magic happens, right? So now what you do is there's another class which we know of, and I can look at my tabs below here, and I go Paradise Info. So I want to call the display method, and I know it's in this class, Paradise Info. It's right there. It's in this class. So the way to call it is you invoke the class name first. So go back here. So what I can do is say Paradise, And if you don't want to worry about misspelling it, mistyping it, you can literally just go to the class, copy, come back here, paste it. Don't even have to worry about what I did. Dot. So we have the class and then the dot, and then we're gonna call the method. Again, if you don't want to mess up and you're like, I don't know, is it capital, lowercase, squiggles, what is it? Just go over, copy, testing, and then paste, like so. Dun, dun, dun. Okay. So now I've got it. So now I am calling the display info method. You notice in test info, there is nothing here. If I just called display info by itself, I would get an error, right? Because it does not exist in this class. But I'm calling it from another class. And we're going to play with a couple things here too to show you some examples of some stuff. So now, here's another thing. If you're calling another class, I'm calling Paradise Info, this method from Paradise Info, you have to make sure that in the other class, I would call it the parent class, however you want to say it, that you've built this class, that you've run it and compiled it, okay? So this has to be, the main one has to be compiled, which we've done because we've run this. And if you're not sure, you just go and compile it. Then I come to this next class and I can do the same. I compile. So it goes through this thing. There's Java C. It did its thing. And now I'm going to run it. And hopefully it just says, there you go. Print out. Guess what it does? So first thing it does is it prints this out right there. And then all it does is it invokes the display info. And again, if you go back to Paradise Info, what is display info? It just shows you those 2 lines of code. So it didn't print out any of this other stuff because that's in the main method. All it does is print out whatever's in display. Okay. So let's do a couple things here. First of all, remember I told you that you have to compile Paradise Info in order to use it in this other one, to call it. So I'm going to go on my left side here. You don't have to do this. You can watch and see what I do. I'm going to go find the Paradise Info class. And I know it's kind of small here. So here's my class. I apologize, I got like 8 million of them. So here's my Paradise Info class, right? I'm going to delete my class file. Because remember, when you compile it, it generates a class file. So I'm just going to delete that. Yes, deleted. It's gone. All right. I am not going to recompile this because I don't want it to generate a new class file. So now I'm going to go back to test info and I'm going to run this. I can compile this, or actually I'm going to try and compile it first. And guess what? It compiled. I have no problem. Now I'm going to try and run it. It automatically built it again. Oh, I cheated on me. Go back here. And I might do this. I'm going to change this to private. And I'm going to recompile this. You don't have to do this. So now this is private. And I can run this. And it runs fine, right? So this program runs fine. Now I'm going to go to test info. Remember, display info is private. I'm going to compile this again. I get an error. I get an error because it says, hey, you got this class, but I don't have it as, it says has private access in Paradise Info. It tells you. It says, hey, bud, it's private. You can't do that. So what would you do? So what you got to do is then you got to go find out who's in charge. Either you can go change it in the class and say, okay, we got to change this to public. Or if someone else is in charge of this code, because that's what happens in a large organization lots of times, you might have to go to somebody else and say, can we change this to public? And they may or may not let you, depending on the circumstances. It depends. Because perhaps there's a reason, maybe this is something with accounting, there's financial information, or it gets access to Social Security, something, who knows? Just depending. This obviously is not a big deal, but you don't know. So sometimes it's not as simple as just saying, oh, fine, just go change this from private and make it public. Boom. Okay. And now it should work fine. So now if I go back to test info, I recompile it and run it, and it works fine. So there's a big thing I've run into a lot throughout my career, drives me crazy, is permissions. Permissions to stuff. I'm going to pause this for a second. Okay. So we've worked through quite a bit already. We did that first, you do it, but I kind of skipped over some stuff. So I'm back up a little bit just to make sure you get everything. So the main method executes automatically. We know that. I'm going to go through some of this kind of fast. And then other methods you put in as you're needed. Okay. So this is what we do. We didn't call ours first, or did we? I can't remember. Maybe we did. We had our main method and the display address, and we called it. So we invoked it. Again, they have comments in here. Feel free when you write code. You'll notice I didn't put a lot. I don't in class. I don't typically put a lot of comments in. Again, at the front of your top of your program, copy and paste your comments. Boom, put it in there. Put your name, the date, all that stuff. Just do that regularly. Get used to that because that's very common in any wherever you're working. You're always doing because you want to know, and then they want to know maybe who updated it. So you go in there, someone else wrote the code. Hey, I updated it on September 20th. Why did you update it? This is what I did. I had to add this piece, right? And that helps because down the road, someone might do that to a program that you have to go into, and then it helps you figure out, oh, why they would they instead of looking through everything, you can just go to a certain specific area. I put my initials. So if I do something like if I add like this method, I'll go in here, I'll do something like this. Added to show info. You know, obviously this is very obvious. I'll put my initials, CAV, and I'll even put the date. Now, different places, I call them shops, different places, I use that interchangeably, companies, whatever, have different criteria sometimes. And some places are like the Wild West, and they don't. Most places are pretty good. They have ways that they want you to do stuff, but right away, I can do this. Now, this is a small program, so it's really easy to see this. But think about this. You have hundreds or thousands of lines of code. It's so much easier for me to just go, at the beginning, just do a control F and just look for CAV. Boom, there it is. And I might have dozens. I might have a whole bunch of changes. If you don't know who changed it, maybe you know the date of someone that changed it, things like that, right? I hope there's keywords, things like that. I know that piece of code you're talking about, and it was me that changed it. I just don't remember a lot about it. Then you can go search. And I think it was this application. It happens all the time. So just kind of be aware. A couple more things and then we'll take a break. So we talked about this, method header, declaration, header, body, blah, 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 fun stuff. So these are your headers, right? Your main header, main method, those are just called your headers, just so you're aware of it. And then the body of the code, the actual code body is what we've been doing. So your void, your display address, again, your headers. You'll notice too, we'll go back to the code. There is nothing in here. This is empty right now. I'm not passing it any information, and we're going to do some of that too. We're not passing any data. These are called parameters or arguments. To me, when you declare the method, it's one thing, and when you call the method, like here, it's called something else. So one way it's called parameter, the other way it's an argument. Most developers will say argument, and we all know what you're talking about. Are you passing any arguments? Did you set it up? What arguments are you sending it? What parameters are you sending it? We know what you're talking about, and we will do a lot of that. Okay. Like I said last time. Okay. We're gonna get into some returns and stuff. Let me show this. So I already talked about some of the identifiers here: public, private, protected, or package. Public is, again, anything that can be used by any other class. And that's what we did when we create ours. Everything we were doing is constantly doing public, so that, again, other classes can access it. They just create an instance to that. So I go to test info, boom. As long as display info is public, I can access it. All you have to do is just reference that class. Okay, use the instance of that class and reference it. Boom, I'm good. Private, you saw what happened when I did private. It just means that you want to have it private to that method. And protected, we're not going to go into the other ones at this time. Don't worry about them. We're okay. They're just variations, and you can also have packages. But the most common one, and I would just stick to it for right now, is using the public access method. Then you don't have to worry about permissions or something getting screwed up. So I would just recommend we're going to stick with that for right now. This kind of breaks down what's going on with just how you're setting up. So we've been writing this code and we're like, well, what does that even mean, what I've been doing? Again, so the public is just what we said. That's the access that you're allowing for this method. What's going on with that? Then static here and here on these two different ones just means that it doesn't require an object to be created. You're not creating an instance of a class or anything like Basically, no object is created, so you can just use static for doing that. If you're creating an object and you end up using static, you will get an error. The compiler will look at that and say, no, you got a problem here. You can't do this. So it will definitely tell you that, just so you're aware. But these are things, again, you're going to spend, the more time you spend with this code, the more time you spend with Java or any other language, you'll get more familiar with this. So if with all this coming at you, don't freak out. It's new. A lot of it's new with that. Okay. Like so. All right. One thing too is the return type. You got one of two return types. What does that mean, return type? We keep using void in a lot of our things. So void, public static void. Void means nothing is coming back from that method. Well, we're going to have methods where something is coming back. Okay. So in test info and paradise info, I've got the main method is void. I'm not returning anything there. And the display info, I'm just calling it. I'm just calling display info, and it's putting information out. It's putting it out there for me. It's not returning any data. So unlike, like I said, if we create a method that would calculate interest, we would call that method, it would calculate interest, and it would send it back to us. And we're going to do those methods very soon. That would return something. That would be returning a value. In that case, it would definitely not be a void method. We would be using a data type to describe what it's returning. And we're going to go through some of that. Okay. But again, if no data is being returned, the return value is void. So again, that's what that's all telling you. It's the most common thing for just displaying using methods returns, and we're going to do some more. Okay. These are very exciting. PowerPoints are good. They keep you on track, but they're so boring. Got your parentheses. They talk about the string. The main method in the application must contain string and identify args as traditional within parentheses. And again, and then when you create a method, you've got the open and close parentheses right now. And I just was telling you, we're not passing any information in there. That's why it's empty. Because normally, always you can have things in here, which we will do soon. When you're not passing any information in, you just can leave it empty, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong at all. Oops. So parameters and returning values. Now these things, oh yeah, there's the next area. So it's, like I said, it's arguments. Data items you use when you call. You're passing information in because you want to do something. If you want to calculate interest rate on a mortgage, for example, I need to know the principal amount of the mortgage or the loan, whatever it is. And I need to know the time. How long is it? You know, is it 30 years? And is it what's the amount, the principal? And then you got to calculate and send it back. Parameters, again, they're very interchangeable, and data items received by the method. So in one sense, they call them, when you define the method, they like to call it parameters. When you're calling it, they call them arguments. In a lot of ways, they're interchangeable. Other developers might yell at me about that, but I think it's fine. Hi. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to create today. Like I said, we're going to go back and forth here. So we're going to create a new class. And this one will be a paradise info. Okay. I don't want this. Go back browse. There we go. Okay. All right. I'm going to leave this the way this is. Okay. So we're going to actually use parameters, and we're going to get into and then returning values. And so this kind of gets into some of the meat of the process. So first we're going to do file, new, Java. Okay. And again, I use my control key and my mouse wheel to just make it bigger, because partly just so I can see it better, but also so you can see it easier on the screen. If you ever want to get rid of one of these windows, you can do that, and you can always reopen it later. I'm kind of lazy, so I just make it smaller, and then I keep opening it, go bigger or small. Okay. So something we're going to do is we're going to create a static method that arguments takes a value. Okay. One of the things we're going to do is we want to get data from the user. So we're going to have to import a library to do that. Remember before we were doing the J option pane, that was a library. This time it's going to be the scanner. It's going to get information from the keyboard. So import java.util, and scanners with a capital S, like so. Don't forget the semicolon. So we're at the very top of the file, we're going to import this library. And that's very common. You'll see languages, any programs all the time where you'll see a whole bunch of import statements. And import is very common throughout most languages. Import's used a lot. Sometimes you can import libraries like this without actually typing import. You can do it through the interface. You can do that too, but it varies. But this is how they do it in Java. So what we're going to do is we're going to create some decorations in here, and they're going to, and this, what they really want you to do, we're gonna get some information from the user. We're gonna store it, and then we're gonna compute some information. Okay. Actually, I made a boo-boo because they're gonna let us cheat, and they're gonna let us go back to Paradise Info. So I'm just gonna close this. And I'm not gonna even save it. I'm gonna go back to Paradise Info, and this is how you do this. We're gonna use Paradise Info, and we're gonna create Paradise Info 2. And I think we did this last week, I believe. And to do that, to copy a class, I'm going to back that up. I'm going to save this again. To copy a class, all you do is you type in the new name of the class, because I want all this information, and I put a 2, and then I do File, Save As. And because I changed the class name, it automatically changed the file name to 2. Now, again, I've already got this on here, so it's going to ask me to overwrite it, which I'll do anyway. I'll save over. But now I'm working in Paradise Info 2. Even though it looks identical, class has changed. And that's a really simple way to just copy a program. So change the class at the top, then do a save as, and now I've got it. I still have the old one in there. I can pull that up. So Paradise Info is still there, and it'll get a little hard to tell the difference because the code is identical. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go to the top of this, and now we're going to do the import. Import. This is java.util.scanner with a capital S. Okay, because we need to get input from the user. Now what they want you to do is they would add decorations as the first statement main method curly brace. So we're going to go down here in main, and we're going to create some variables. So we're going to use double space price. And hopefully that makes sense. It's a price, so it's a decimal, and that's why we're using double. Could we use float? Yes, we could use float, but they want to use double. Savings, and then those 3. Now, we imported the scanner library, and now we want to use it. It's a class that we have. We can't just use the class directly. We have to create what's called an instance of that class. I don't know if you remember, was it last class or this is week 3? Remember talking about the dog class? You have a dog, that's the basics of the class, and you can create instances of that dog. So you can create a German Shorthair, a Golden Retriever, a Dalmatian. Those are called instances of that class. And then in the instance of that class, I can have it has the breed, I can have weight, whatever you want for that class. But you can't change the main dog class. And that's the idea here. I cannot change the scanner class. And so what I have to do is I have to create an instance of it. And the way to do that is you type scanner. Now the book has, you type the word keyboard. I hate that. I hate that word. I use input. You can type keyboard if you want. You can use that. I just don't use that. And we're creating, and this is just a format. It's kind of a funny format until you get used to it. This is how you do it in Java. It's new scanner, and then system.in in. So now we've just created input is now an instance of the scanner class. So now I can use this to get information from the keyboard, from the user, what they want to do. Okay. I'm going to come down and hit a couple lines. Notice I'm spacing and doing that. That's just me. Again, the compiler doesn't care how much white space you have. White space is good. It allows you as a developer to see what's going on instead of cramming everything together. I had one student, he literally put everything on one line, and you can do that because the compiler doesn't care. I mean, he literally would take it, he'd get rid of everything, and the whole thing was, all the code was on one line. And he just did that just to be goofy, but it works, but it's awful. I would never recommend it because it's impossible to debug. I mean, it's all one line. You can't see it. So again, a lot of this is just for you, for your benefit. Okay, so I've got all this information. So what they want to do is you want to get the cutoff, as they say, they want to get the cutoff price for the discount. So you have to print a message to the user, and then you're going to get the information from the user. So first you just do you print system.out.print. Now you'll notice I'm just doing print, not println, because I want to keep the cursor right at the end of the statement. So the user will enter, so I'll say enter cutoff price for discount. And you can make it fancy, whatever. They do little carets, right carets there, quote. So what'll happen is your cursor will end up right here on that, and then they can enter whatever they want to. You can give hints. So please enter a number between 0 and 5, 0 and 10, whatever you want. It's up to you. It's your program. You're the creator of it. But for right now, we're just going to leave it like this. Now we're going to use one of the variables, the price variable. Okay, because we're gonna get the cutoff price for the discount. So what is the cutoff price going to be? I don't know. So what I'm going to do is just going to copy this variable and then paste it. So price is going to equal what? I'm going to get information from the user. What is it? So I'm going to use this input, this instance of input that I have is input dot. So input is a class that I'm using, and I'm using a method to get the information. I can get a string, I can get a character, I can get a double, I can get a float, I can get an int, I can get any of those data types. What kind of data type is this? Price is what? Price is a double, right? So guess what? Input has a method called next and double with a capital D, next double. And that's the way you get the data from the user. It gets this information, it says I'm getting a double data type from a user, and it's going to store that information in the price variable. It's going to put that in price for you. Now what you could do, I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to get rid of this. Now what you can do is you can get rid of this. I'm going to comment this out. Comment that out, comment that out. Okay. Now what you could do, like I've talked before, is we could do something like this, just to make sure you're getting what you think you're getting. I can do system.out.print ln, and I could do something like this and just say, I don't know, price equals quote. So I have a string, and then I'm going to use a plus sign to concatenate the actual variable price. Okay, so I've got that. So then at least I know that what the user gave me is accurate. All I'm going to do is spit out. They're going to give it to me. I'm going to spit it right back out. That's it. I know, very simple, right? Right. But you'd be amazed at how often I'm working in programs and something comes in and you think it's this, but it ends up being something else. So it's just one other way to check your work. So let's do this. And again, normally what I like to do when I add a couple lines of code is I usually like to build it, compile it, make sure I don't have any crazy errors. And I have an error. I misspelled. So that's good. Println. That's not Println. I used to visit Println when I was a child. It was a lovely place. Okay, Println. Okay. There we go. And now let's run it. It compiled, everything's peachy. So then I get a little thing at the bottom of my screen, enter price for cutoff. So I don't know, for discount, I'll say $50. And then it just spit out, price is $50. Notice that also the output is a 10 instead of the traditional currency, like 50.00, and there's ways to format that and make it look appropriate. This is acceptable. If you handed this in to me as your draft, I would accept this. I would not mark points off it. That's fine. But I will show you there's ways to make it look appropriate, like real currency. But we know we got it now, so it worked. So we know that piece of code works. So what you can do is you can just comment this out if you want and leave it. We'll probably use something similar to that. So we got the cutoff price. What else do they want? They want that discount rate. as a whole number, what's the discount rate? So we're going to find out. So first we have to ask the user for the discount rate. So system.out.print, please enter discount rate. Now they tell you to enter as a whole number. So they don't enter a decimal, right? Or float or double, however you want to say it. Enter discount rate as a whole number. That's it. And as we move along, we're going to put checks in so that when a user doesn't do what you ask them to do, enter letters, enter a name, and they enter numeric or something like that, you're going to be able to check it and bounce it back to them and say, no, 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 I asked you only letters, only numbers, something like that. Okay. So now we're going to use the discount variable. So I'm going to go up to discount, copy it, bring it down here and paste it. Again, if you're a fast typer, you can type it. That's fine. It's one less thing to make mistakes about. I like. So discount equals what? It's input dot. I have to get the discount. And guess what? Discount is a double. So I'm going to do the same thing. Next double. And I keep hitting Control S to save my work, just in case you weren't aware. Save early and often. make your life a lot better. Okay. Now I feel a little confident. I feel pretty confident that the code is pretty good. I'm not going to put another print statement in there at this point. But what I am going to do is I'm going to compile this again. Like I said, I enter a couple lines of code and I compile it. I want to make sure that it do another println. I do not want to visit println. Okay. And then finally, in this code, not finally, but they want you to use a variable called savings, which is what we created up here. So I'm going to go to savings and I'm going to copy that. And I'm going to go down here, put savings. Savings is going to equal a method that we haven't created yet. And I just told you about calling methods that we haven't created yet. I find that very annoying, but we're going to do it. So it's going to be called compute discount info. Notice the capital D and the capital I. And then we're going to pass it two parameters, two arguments, price and the discount. So we're going to pass it those two. Okay. Now we've got other code that we're going to be putting in here. But just so you're aware, like I showed you before, if I go and try and compile this right now, hit the little plus key and try and compile it, it's going to blow up, right? Because it's looking for compute discount right there. It doesn't exist. Of course it doesn't exist. I just created it. I'm calling something that doesn't exist. Of course. Okay, fine. Be that way. Again, what you could do if you wanted to, I'm not going to do it. I mean, you could comment this out. Sorry, / comment it out. So it's fine. It doesn't. So if you want to, you can still compile it. I just like going along each way, make sure my code keeps compiling. So I'm going to comment it out for right now, just because I know I won't have the error. So we'll do that. All right. We're gonna call this method where it's going to compute the discount, and then we're going to spit out some information, and that's what that does after that. So we're going to spit out some information after that. What are we going to spit out? Oh, it's very exciting. So we're going to do system out.print line. And then it's going to say, and we don't have to type all this, special this week. That's right. On any service over there, price. Okay. So they have a special this week if the customer spends anything over whatever. So whatever we enter. So I entered $50. Let's say $50 is what we're saying. It's telling the user this. There's a special this week. And we're going to do another print. And this one's going to say discount. Tell them the discount. The discount of, quote, I have a string, and I'm going to concatenate what? Plus the actual data value, discount. That's a variable. Remember, this is the variable we used. We got that just up here from the user. So I'm going to spit that out. Plus, so watch your quotes. Quote, percent. Like so. So it's 5% discount, whatever the case may be, but it actually, spit that out and make it really obvious. And then finally, system.out.println. That's huge savings. Sure. Of at least. And then what they do is they put a $sign there. That's one way to do it, to format it. Kind of a cheap way of getting away from it, but that's fine. And then plus and savings. Savings is what we're going to calculate from that method. We can type it even though it doesn't exist yet. That's fine. So savings. Now, even though we have savings in here and we commented this other method out, we should get an error because savings is not defined. Right. So savings is not defined. It says not been initialized. Okay. So it's going to give you an error for that. Well, fine. That's fine. So right now it doesn't matter. It won't compile anyway because we're using this variable. So I'm just going to uncomment out this call to this method. So we'll get the savings back. So now that's there. So now we'll have two errors, right? Well, it's just, you know what it's just going to give you the one error. It doesn't even get to the next one. So boom, it stops right there. Okay. Good rule of thumb, as we get into this, and we're going to get much more into debugging, is if you ever get a whole bunch of errors that pop up, general rule of thumb is just go to the very first error. If you can, try to fix the very first one, because typically it's a domino effect. Once you have one error, you know, I had a flat tire, I careened into the wall, broke my tail light, I hit my fender, I did all that. My fender's broke, I got to fix it. Well, what happened? You know, so it's just, you understand, it's cascading effect. So always, that's the rule of thumb. Okay. So now we have to create this method. Okay. So what are we gonna do? So here's something to watch, and I'm gonna make my code pretty small so you can see what I'm doing. I'm gonna make this there because this is a common mistake developers. Notice this is all main. This is all under main. Okay. So you do not create another method in the main method. Main method stays by itself because you'll notice I have display info down here and it's separate. Now I can put another method anywhere I want, so I'm going to put it right below it. It's outside the curly brace because I'll see developers put a new method in there. You can't do that. So we're going to create this method called public, and then I'll make this bigger in a second. Public static. Now this is going to be a method that's going to return something. So we're using arguments and values. So it's not a public static void. It's not a void anymore. This is a double. It's returning a double value. And again, I'm lazy. I'm going to copy, and I'm going to paste the actual name of the method, compute disk info. And then we're going to do the arguments. All right. So let me go to here. All right. So we're going to do the arguments. Now the arguments, when you actually create the method itself, you'll notice we're calling it up here. So we're calling it and passing it price and discount. This is where we're actually defining this method. Each of these arguments are a certain data type. In this case, both of them are what? Doubles, yeah. So what you do is you preface the argument. So you say double, space, and then here's the other thing. You do not, I repeat, you do not have to use the same wording, verbiage. I don't have to call this price here to match this. It can be called anything I want. Some programmers are like, no, let's keep it the same. Keep price. And that's fine. You can do that. But you could do something like, you could just say PR if you wanted to. Because all it's doing, it's just a placeholder. It's sending data in there. But we're going to stick with price for right now, just to make it easy. And then the second one, discount, is also double, right? So again, you do the data type, space, and then what are they? Again, they start with discount rate. They made it bigger, which that's too long, but I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to be a good boy. Nice. Okay. So this is the definition of this. So right now, this whole thing should compile. Let's try it. Because all I did was create. Oh no, we're still getting an error, right? Dun, dun, dun. So we are creating a method that is returning a double value. But the biggest problem we have right now is we're not returning anything, right? It's just an empty method. And that's what this says. Hey Shmo, you're missing a return statement. Wake up. I don't care that it's Friday afternoon. You gotta put that in there. So we will. So we're gonna create this method. All right. but we're going to do the calculate discount, and this is going to be really tricky. You ready? We're going to create some variables, double, savings. Now, something we're going to talk about too, I'm going to talk about now, I'm not skipping around a lot, but anything that you do inside of a method, variables, anything like that, this is called local scope. This is the scope. It's the range. So I'm creating variables inside this method. So when I come in this method, it creates a variable called savings. But once I'm out of this method, savings will no longer exist. It goes away. So it creates a variable in memory. Excuse me, I use it and it goes away. So a good rule of thumb is only use variables, create variables that you need to, and keep them local to that method. So I'm going to do savings is equal to what? I have price coming in, so price is coming in, so I'm going to use it. Price times, so it's an asterisk, times what? The discount rate. So my savings is going to be that times discount rate. But I want it to look nice, so I'm going to divide it by 100, right? Yeah, I know, you're told there would be no math. There's math in programming, I'm sorry. And then finally what we need to do is we need to actually return the value. What are we returning? We're returning savings, because that's what we just calculated. So then you can do this, you can say return, actually use the word return, space, and then whatever you're returning. Now, because this is a method's a double, I have to return a double. In this case, I am doing that. I'm returning savings. And that is a double. Make sure you compile and everything compiles and you have no errors, and it did. Java C, it compiled. Yay. Okay. Now remember, I can run this whole thing, but I don't have to call this, but I'm going to call it because I'm going to have other errors if I don't call it. So we're going to do it. Let's just run through it and let's just see what happens, see if it works. Now part of it you're expecting, remember, always do the math before you actually write the code. So make sure you know this. So we compile it and now we're going to run it. So the cutoff price for the discount, I'll say is say $50. Enter the discount rate as a whole number. I don't know, I'll say 10. So it's going to say the discount of 10%, that's a huge savings, at least $5, right? And again, do the math. So what's 10% of 50? It's $5, right? So right then you know that your logic is correct, that this is an algorithm. It's a simple algorithm, but yet this is an algorithm. And you'll notice how small this function is. This method is tiny, right? It's only like 3 lines. Not like 3 lines. It is 3 lines. Not like 3 lines. That's fine. I had a developer, an instructor, professor when I was in undergrad taking classes, and he would mark off points if you ever had a subroutine or a method or anything like that longer than 10 lines. To him, he felt 10 lines was the max. Now, there's really no magic number because there could be situations where you need 12 lines or 15 lines, and it's still good code. So I have a hard time just arbitrarily saying, oh, 10 lines, that's it. If you're doing 11 lines, then you're doing something wrong. That's not true. It's just, but, what do I say? So anyway, let me make sure something here. Let me call this again. Main method, we're creating variables. And these are local to the main method, but I can pass these in, like I did, into the method. So these have no value, and I can pass them in. I'm getting information. Now I'm getting the price. I've got the price right there. I've got the discount right there. And then I pass price and discount into this method that I've just created. And then when it's done, it's going to return some value, and it's going to end up in savings. Now, if something blows up in here in compute discount, then it never goes back, and I never get a value in savings. That could happen. So there's so many different scenarios, so many different places where it can have a problem. So a lot of times when you're debugging stuff, you just keep it simple and you try to go very simply. And like I said, lots of times you'll use print statements, like I said. So let's do this. I love to blow things up. I'm not great at it, but I had as a developer, when you work for a place, a lot of times what happens is you have the programmers like us, developers that we're working on stuff. And then your code will go to a tester or QA person. I'll write some code, and then when I think I'm done, I'm like, this is pretty good. I'm pretty good. I'm pretty awesome. I'll ship my code off to the QA person. He was good. A good tester doesn't do the traditional click here, do this, do that. They try everything. So if you're telling me to enter an integer, to go in and enter floating, decimals, whatever, it's under characters to make sure that you're checking this stuff. Now we're not there yet. We're gonna get there, but she will enter garbage at the yin yang to make sure that it doesn't blow up, right? Because what's gonna happen? The customer is gonna get this, and they're gonna do that, right? And it's gonna blow up. So there's a lot of things like that to think about. And we can do that. So let's try that right here. I'm going to just run this, go down here. So I'm going to enter an A. Dun, dun, dun. It blows up immediately, right? It doesn't want a character or a string or anything. What does it want? It wants a double. Excuse me. Because it's trying to get this, and this line of code, it's getting information, enter cutoff price for discount, right? Where do we do that? Right there. This line of code right here. Input next double. It says, give me that. Give me a double. If you don't give it a double and put it in there, it blows up. So down the road, we're going to put changes, code in there to prevent a user from doing that. But they can't do that. Because if you ship this program out right now, there's a good chance that it would work maybe 25 to 50% of the time. Because people will make mistakes, they might fat finger it, whatever you want to call it, right? You don't want that. As a developer, garbage in, garbage out. So you want to make it bulletproof on the front end so that they can't screw it up. Because otherwise what happens is potentially this data that you're entering in here may go to the system down the road or into a database. And then if you're like entering this stuff and then all of a sudden the manager comes up and says, hey, what kind of discounts are we giving out? What kind of thing sales? How are things going? And you show him a database full of crap, he's gonna be like, well, what is this? Right? You have A's and B's and you should have numbers and I can't calculate. This is nothing. So you want to make sure it's really tight on the front end. Garbage in, garbage out. Make it really good on the front end, so on the back end you don't get garbage. Giggle. Very common. You get it at the source. Hopefully this is making sense. This is all kind of really critical stuff as a programmer. And we talked a lot about this stuff. We talked about local variables, only known within the boundaries. That's what that means. Known only within the boundaries of the method. What does that mean? What I was just showing you. When you create a local variable, let me make this a little bit smaller here. When you create a local variable, double savings in here is a local variable. It's local to compute discount info. That's all that means. I'm in the main method. This is a local variable to here. But I am passing price and discount on to the next method. So it doesn't have to be in this method. You know, it's being passed on. So the way to get around being able to use this is you pass the data, pass it along, and that's what you do. Now, there is a way that you could take these variables, all three of these variables, and you could put them outside the class, and then they would be called what are called global variables, and they are available everywhere at all times. There are developers that hate that. I think that's terrible, but sometimes you need a global variable. Example, you log into a system. You enter your user ID and password, right? Your user ID typically, and especially on a web page application, shows up on all the screens. It needs that information. Now, you could pass it along every single time. You could do that. That is one way to do that, but a simpler way for something like that makes sense to use a global variable because it wants your user ID. I'm CAV, so I want to see, it wants to see CAV. There's a lot of systems that'll do that. It has your name at the top, it has your user ID, whatever the case may be. Websites do that kind of stuff. They cache stuff. I don't know how much do any of you know about like web development? Have you ever, let's see. So method, our parameter, the thing, this is a method that has one parameter. You're calculating across. We just did one, we did two, right? We're ahead of that already. We just did two parameters, right? We did price and discount, two parameters. And in this case, they're both doubles. And you can mix this up. One of them could be an integer, one of them could be a string. They could both be integers. They could both be strings. They could be whatever. So they can be any data type. It doesn't matter. Data type is irrelevant. How many parameters can you have in here? I'm glad you asked. A lot. Here's the thing. When you start having too many parameters in here, too many arguments, it becomes unwieldy. And you got to decide, why are you passing in 300 parameters into a method, right? I need everything. I need to know everything in this method. Well, maybe you should break the method up then, right? Maybe you have a method that has hundreds of lines Keep it small, keep it simple. And again, think about it from a maintenance standpoint, debugging standpoint, that kind of thing. You don't want to have anything too much. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense.